tutorial, we'll be covering another one of our new beta features called the Awarded Grants Tracker. The Awarded Grants Tracker takes your grant funding research just a step further to start looking at the organizations who are funding grants in similar work streams as yours. This information is pulled from Candid, which is an online database of all nonprofit information. You can find it at candid.org. And similar to our grants research tab, keywords and filters. So let's go with the keyword youth. Let's say that my organization works in the field of youth. Let's also say that my organization prefers to partner with organizations or funders who can give us at least $25,000 or more. This doesn't have to be the case for your organization, and you don't have to indicate any sort of award amount range, but just know that if you aren't a bit more selective here, you will see a whole slew of $1,000 grants. So for purposes of this tutorial, we're going to assume that my organization who works with youth is looking for grants or funding opportunities of at least $25,000 and higher. So I'll indicate that in my award amount range. You can also indicate what states you're interested in looking at. So let's say you want to find funders who are funding programs for youth for that award amount range, specifically in states like Arizona or California or Florida, Hawaii. You can indicate specifically which states you're looking at. I wouldn't apply those though until you run a search, and if your search needs to be refined just a little bit more, then you can start applying the recipient state or territory filter. Other filter types, you can filter by the recipient organization type. So if you'd like to see grants that were given specifically to tribal governments and agencies or governments and agencies, we have pulled this information directly from what's provided for us in Candid, so it is not specifically curated into tags that translate one-to-one for our communities. So just be mindful here. I think that what's most useful is if you're looking for tribal governments, governments and agencies, I think those would be the two tags that you use. Foundations, family foundations, operating foundations would probably be helpful. So just take a look through this, but best practice in my experience is to just go ahead and leave that as any, and we can come back to that if we absolutely need to. Finally, there is grants transaction type. So there are just a couple of different types of funding. So cash grants, which is largely what many of our users and grant seekers are interested in. There are employee matches where companies whose employees they have a special program. So for certain companies, if your employees give up to a certain amount, that the company will then match that grant. So let's say I am an employee of a corporation and I choose to give $500 grant, $500 donation to a certain organization. My company has a match policy, so they will match my $500 if it's within their giving parameters, turning my $500 donation into a $1,000 donation. Grants to individuals is another one that might be of interest to some folks. This is not typical. So if you're interested in grants to individuals, this is for perhaps scholarships or some sort of fellowship. Sometimes there are grants for basic needs. You can go ahead and take a look because that might help point you to some organizations who do give grants out to individuals. But again, this is very rare, but just wanted to flag that. So let's go ahead and run this search. So my keyword, as a reminder, is youth. I've selected an award amount range of $25,001 all the way up to over $10 million. I'm going to click Update. And what this gives me is 777 items. Now what you find in this award data, These are awards that were given out to recipients, so organizations or entities who serve Alaska Native, American Indian, and Native Hawaiian communities. And this data covers grants that were given between fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 25, running off of the regular calendar, January to December of each of those respective years. We don't have a lot of data from FY25 available to us just yet because 990s, that's the tax return for nonprofit or grant making organizations to file. So that's their tax return, the tax return that they file. That's not due until May of 2026. So we won't start seeing that information roll in until later on this year. But whatever information is available, we have it here in the TFR. So let's see. There are quite a few grants here. What I want to do, because I don't have the time to go through 777 grants, so let me just first, I want to narrow this down. Let me say that I'm an organization who serves folks in Arizona and in New Mexico. I'm going to update that and see what that additional filter gives me. So remember, we started with 777 items and we're now down to 111 items. A much more manageable number, but it's still a little bit high. But let's go ahead and take a look. So a lot of these look like they're for schools. Let me take a look here and say, okay, maybe I'm not a school, but maybe I'm providing youth development. Okay, here, let's take a look at this one. So this was for $165,000. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. The grant population served by this grant, American Indians, as well as adults. The subject is education, youth development, and employment. And the description of this grant that was given is to support to help Native American and other youth aged 16 to 24 living in Guadalupe and Tempe with career and college readiness opportunities. Okay, so let's say that aligns very well with the work that I do at my organization. I'm really interested in learning more. Okay, so who funded this grant? Linked funders. The Nina Mason Pulliam Charitable Trust. Very cool. So let me go ahead and click on that. And when you're in the TFR, if this particular funder has an open grant opportunity, you can see it here. It will be linked directly in here. So we can see that they have given, that's the average size of grant. Okay, so we can also see that in FY24 they gave they gave $457,000. So you can see a little bit of the giving history here. And what that helps you to do as a grant seeker is start to think about how much for. That's one of the common questions that I get asked as a grant professional is, should we just go ahead and ask for the full amount, or should we try to figure out maybe a sweet spot? If you can find a sweet spot that serves your program and gets you close to what you need, then absolutely. And if asking for the full amount gets you what you need, then I would do that too. But really the key here is building this relationship, doing a little bit of research, and this is how you get it done. So next thing I would do is, this is where you start to connect the dots. And we've talked about this in our recipient tracker tutorial. So if you haven't watched that, go ahead and watch that tutorial here on our YouTube channel. What I would do next is I would write down this. You can actually save it right here with back to gathering these names. You also want to take note of the different organizations that they've funded. And all of this is going to inform your relationship building and trying to get an introduction, because as you can see here, there is no readily available website. What you can do is click on their candid profile. If you click on their profile, you've got a couple of different pieces of information here. You've got their mailing address, telephone number, and here is a URL. We're going to click on that and see what happens because sometimes these, yes. So this is why this URL does not appear in the TFR because it's not an active link. So what I would also do is to take note of this information. We're working with Candid at the moment to make sure that this information gets transferred over to the TFR so that you have readily accessible information on how to contact these folks. So there's a few things that you could do. First is you can develop a one-pager. If you don't know how to develop a one-pager, you can go to our resources tracker. Go to our resources tracker here. Click on our grant research writing and reporting toolkit, and we give some really great templates for putting together a one-pager or a simple grant application. But for the purposes of this tutorial, let's go back to that. We're looking at Nina Mason. Here's how I would connect the dots. Once you've bookmarked this, you're going to go through and you're going to kind of look at all of these grants to see, which organization looks like they're most aligned with me and, who I want to get introductions to. So you've bookmarked it. Now you're looking also at these different organizations. So now you're going to think about you're going to want to get all of these organizations, you're going to want to get all of these funders into a list. Start thinking about your own network. Who do I know on my tribal council? Who's already funding me that I could reach out to say, hey, are these people in your network? You want to compile the list and send the list to them so that they can take a look at every single organization who you would like to meet to get that warm introduction. So you don't want to send them just one off, like, can you make an introduction? Can you make an introduction? Just do your due diligence and pull together a list for them is best practice. So again, tribal council, think about who already funds you. Think about your staff. Think about your board. Think about your professional network. Think about who you know who might work for this trust. And similar to the recipients data tracker that I shared in our other tutorial, you can also take a look to see maybe you know somebody who works at or works for or is a former employee or board member for any of these organizations who were funded by this particular funder. And you can ask them, was this a good partnership? Did you feel that their way of operating, that their priorities were very aligned with the work that you do? Would you work with them again? Because as we all navigate through needing to get funds for our program, it's also important to know who you are building relationships with because you want to make sure that you have good partners. So, similar to trying to get an introduction to these folks, if you know anybody in your network who's associated or formally associated with these organizations, reach out to them. Ask those questions and then say, do you know how I might get an introduction? Maybe that person can say, oh yeah, so-and-so on our board actually is on their board. So let me try to get an introduction that way. But you need to be prepared with a very comprehensive one to two pager that talks about your work and the impact that you've made. So please make sure that you've got data in there, that you're prepared to, if you're asked to share something with them, that you can turn it around very quickly. So that is how to use the awarded grants tracker. And just to note that when you go to your bookmarks, you can also group these different ways, and you can click on funded data source and see that this pulls together the funders that I bookmark there in the awarded grants tracker. So this is where you can find all of your funders so that you keep them in one place. So in your bookmarks, just make sure to use this to organize the best way that works for you. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you back here for another how-to tutorial.